All right, good morning, everybody. This is James Morris. This is Tuesday morning's edition of Ask the Master Auto Technician, and every day I try to come up with something you can use to, well, maybe to figure out what's wrong with your vehicle. I have cars that come in every day with problems that I find very, very simple, but to the customer or when they bring the car in, that's why they're being drug in. They can't figure out what's wrong with them. They've worked on the car, they've done this to the car, and the car still won't start or won't turn over or won't crank or whatever. And every time that something like this happens, is normally nothing is, well, it's usually not as bad as the customer thinks. You'd be surprised how many times the biggest problem with the car is a battery terminal. Yesterday, 2 cars alone came in, both of them on hooks, wouldn't start. One customer put a battery in, or put a starter in, and still couldn't get the car to start. Now, if you put a battery and a starter in these 2 vehicles and you pay to have it done, you're probably in between $500 and $1,000 parts and labor to have those 2 jobs done. They brought the car in on a hook. I looked at it and I said, I'll be more than happy to take care of it. I'll find out what's wrong with it. It's usually about an hour's diagnostics to take care of it, go from there. First thing I do when any car comes in, I don't care what it is, if the car will start and run, we try to verify the customer's problem. That's the very first thing we do. But if a car comes in with a no crank, no run, no nothing, you turn the key and there's no sound, there's no whatever, always start at the battery. Always start at the battery. Please, I don't know how to repeat this more than anything, but make sure you got a fully charged battery, and make sure that when you can turn the headlights on and they come on nice and bright. That's what I see a lot of people fail to do. They will put a battery in, they'll put a starter in, they'll do all these things thinking they got it, they've solved their problem with the car won't crank or won't start or do anything. And if they just turn their headlights on, they see their headlights don't work. And that's what I see more than anything. So when a car comes in and I have no crank, no start, no nothing, I turn the headlights on. If I don't have any headlights, at least it tells me, hey, there's no juice up here, or we got a bad battery connection or whatever. So then we go, when we start at the battery, we make sure it's fully charged, we make sure that it's capable of starting the car. Sometimes it means I will bypass the ignition switch. I may turn the key to on and go down there and jump across the wires on the starter to make the car turn over, just to see if the engine's froze up, or to see if there's something like that's happened. You'd be surprised how many times that we have cars that come in, the customer's sure that it's something minor, and sometimes it's not so minor, the engine's froze up. And sometimes, most of the time when they come in, it's very, very simple what's wrong with the car. And people don't seem to realize the importance of, well, they understand the importance of having 12 volts or more. And when I say 12 volts or more, most people think that if they got 12 volts, they got a fully charged battery. Wrong answer. If you got 12 volts in your battery, technically you got a dead battery. If you got a half charged battery, it's 12.3 volts. If it's a fully charged battery, it's 12.65. I know that sounds kind of hard to believe, but believe it or not, 12 volts is not a fully charged battery. So if you go to the parts store and you buy you a brand new handy dandy battery, and you take your digital voltometer and you look at it and got 12.1 volts, and you say, fully charged battery, wrong answer. Go charge that battery up before you stick it in there. I don't care if you have to put it on overnight on a trickle charge at 2 amps. Charge that battery up to where you have 12.65 in it. If you put that battery in with 12 volts in it, it's only going to keep 12 volts in it. It won't ever charge up more than probably much more than it is right now. I know that sounds hard to believe. Alternators are not designed to charge dead batteries. They're charged to maintain the charge it started out with. So if it starts off with 12 volts, 12.1, the alternator kicks in after you start the car up. It puts it up to about 75% of its maximum rated ability, and it charges it back up to a little bit more than it was. It's going down the road around 13.8 to 14.2. But the way the computer works on it, that battery will never, ever fully get charged. And a lot of times it takes out the alternator. We have a car right now that came in yesterday. It's going to be 3.5 to 4 hours just to change the alternator, because they had a questionable battery that was pointed out to them months ago and said, look, your battery is heading south. Your battery is 3 years old. You really need to get rid of this battery. Oh, yeah. Okay, just letting you know, this battery is 3 years old. It needs to go away. If you're not, you're going to end up coming in here on a hook and having your alternator replaced. I've never heard of that. Well, fine. Okay, I'm just letting you know that's how it works. Well, car comes in yesterday on a hook. Sure enough, alternator. He thought for sure there was something wrong with the security system, because when you turn the key, nothing happened. Nothing. I mean, no noise, no nothing. And what it was the battery is completely stone cold dead. Came out there with my digital voltometer and touched it, and it read, it was like 8 volts in it. And I went, I wasn't even 8 volts in it. It was nothing hardly in it whatsoever. And I looked at it, I said, this is not a good sign. So we go grab a jumper box and we put on there. Car fires right up. I said, well, that's a good sign. It starts right up. We don't see any lights on the dash and everything. And I said, well, let's see if it's charging. So while the jumper box is on there, that's what we do. We touched it with a digital voltometer, and guess what? It wasn't charging a bit. It really wasn't. Just whatever the voltage was in the jumper box. Drove it into the car, did our check on it, make sure we're having your signals to excite the alternator, making sure that there's no voltage drop between the big post in the back of the alternator and the battery. We made sure there's continuity. It would light up a headlight. That's something that a lot of people don't ever bother to do. Make sure that it will light up a headlight, that big post on there. If you're checking out that alternator and trying to make sure that you've got good power between the alternator and the battery, that big wire there, take your headlight, put the positive end of your headlight on the on that big post, and take the other end and touch the block. If the light gets nice and bright, wonderful, great. But I've seen so many cars over the years that people just overlook that. Shops overlook it. They'll put an alternator after alternator after alternator after alternator and can't figure out what's burning the alternators up. And they never look at that big post that goes on the back of the alternator, and they see that wire is kind of crackly, crunched, and burnt. It looks like it's there. It looks like it's got continuity. It looks like it's all connected. The rubber may be burnt off a little bit, or the insulation, but that's what the problem is. And we've done voltage drop checks on it and seen as much as 5 and 6 volts, even though it's connected. You'd swear there's nothing wrong with it, but we'd do a voltage drop check by taking our digital voltometer, going from the back to the side of the alternator to the positive side of the battery, and it only read like 6 volts. That's how much drop you got. I mean, really hard to believe. Take that post off, cut it, solder a new end on it, put it back together, and we only have a voltage drop of about less than 1/4 of a volt. And that's what you're supposed to have. You shouldn't have more than 0.250 voltage drop between the alternator and the battery. But a lot of people have a lot more than that due to battery terminals that are dirty, bad connections, excessive resistance. But these are the things that I try to talk about to get you to not to have to call AAA and have your car towed in. Is check that battery. Insist that, if you've got a problem with the car not starting, not doing anything, first thing you do, go out there and make sure the battery is fully charged. Now, if you don't have a digital voltometer, it's going to be very, very difficult to find out if you got a charged up battery. But you can always go out there and turn your headlights on. Do the headlights come on? Yay! No, they don't come on. Why don't they come on? Well, maybe the battery's dead. Maybe you need to go find a battery charger, put it on there, take the battery out, clean the terminals, make sure they're clean, put them back on there and see what happens. You'd be surprised how many times cars come in here with temporary battery cable ends. That's the ones you cut the end of your battery cable off, you skin back the wire, you clamp it on there, and you put it on there. That's the worst thing you can put on your car. It may get you, it's for temporary use only. That's what it says on the little card that you buy these parts, these little battery cable ends. In fine print, the very bottom of it, it says for temporary use only. The reason it's temporary is because it's not a closed soldered on end. You've got dissimilar metals. You've got galvanized bolts. You've got a galvanized cover plate. You've got lead. You've got copper. You've got 3 materials together exposed to the atmosphere. That's right, exposed to the atmosphere, which is nothing more. It's just going to turn into a great big resistor over a period of time, and it's going to cause excessive voltage drop and can cause a lot of problems. You can cause your alternator to fail. It can cause your starter to fail because of low voltage. That's what kills starters, is low voltage. If you've only got 12 volts in it, it's when you turn the key on, that's not a fully charged battery. That battery drops down to below 9 volts a lot of times to fire up that engine, and that's really kind of hard on the starter. It's not designed to operate at below 9 volts. It'll get down at around 8 volts, and that's not really, really good. We try to keep that from happening. But that's what burns up starters is low voltage. So same thing burns up alternators. So the most important thing you can do is keep those battery terminals clean. Keep those battery terminals permanent if you have to cut one off, because it's just nasty and corroded and looks like a green fuzz growing all over it. And when you take it apart and clean it, it just falls apart. You can put a temporary battery cable in on there to get you to a shop and get it repaired. But the best way to do it is to take one and solder the end. You can buy a permanent battery cable in. That's what they're called. You can buy it at Napa, any place. It takes a little skill to do it, because the first time I did it, I didn't do it right, and I think I wasted 2 or 3 of them before I figured out how quickly you have to do it. But what we do is we take those permanent battery cable ends. They're usually the biggest lug we can, because a lot of times on the positive side, you got 3 big wires going into it. And I'll get that, and they put a solder pellet that goes into it, and then I'll cut the wires back, clean them all up, and put a big piece of shrink tape on it, and shrink tubing, and stick and slide it back up. Then we heat up this permanent battery cable in to where it just melts all the solder. And we have a gallon of water standing by at the ready, so it takes 2 people to do it. And so we'll get over there, we hold this with a pair of vice grips. It's nice and hot, and it's got liquid solder in it. We take those those wires, and we cram it inside there where that solder is, and we let it sit there for about 2 or 3 seconds. That way it gets inside all the copper and grabs a hold of it real good, and someone hits it with that water I've got over there. And when we do that, it cools down instantly. We give a nice tug on it to make sure it's good and dry. Good and tight, and nothing pulls free. Blow the water out of it, put the heat shrink tubing back on it, and then we heat it. And then now we've got a permanent airtight repair. And that's how you fix a battery cable in. Is it cheap to do? Well, it's a heck of a lot cheaper to do it that way than it is to replace a battery cable. Some of these battery cables are $300 and $400 just the part. One on a Lincoln LS. Ooh, I think we priced one a couple years ago. It was $397, our cost for the part. By the time we put everything together, the customer had a $600-700 bill. Parts and labor to do all that. And what we told the customer, I said, you really don't want to do that, because that's what he came in asking for. I said, let me put a permanent battery cable in on there. He said, how much is that going to cost? I said, about $100. He said, $100 versus $600? I'll take it. We did that. And it's fixed, and it's never had a problem again with it. He kept burning up alternators. He kept burning up starters, and he couldn't figure out what it was, and what it was voltage drops. He had battery terminal ends that were just nasty and corroded, and when we did a voltage drop test across his positive and negative cables, the positive cable had a 1.5 volt drop. The negative cable had almost a 3 volt drop. You add that together, that's 4.5 volt drop. How that car even started just amazed me. Well, that's what it was. Sometimes it would start, sometimes it wouldn't start. I remember that's exactly what the car came in and said, I got the weirdest problem. We looked at, popped the hood, looked at it, and said, you know what? I think we need to start right here. Let's start at this battery and see what's going on. Well, it's a brand new battery. Yeah, I see it's a brand new battery, but those cables look like something out of a horror movie. They're just all, grown over and everything. I said, that's your problem more than likely. Change that, fix that. Everybody was happy. The car was happy. The customer was happy. We were happy. We got the customer taken care of. And that's what we do at James Auto Center. We sell service. We don't sell parts and labor. We sell service. We find people a lot of times, well, I can get this done cheaper somewhere else. I know you possibly can, but we're going to take care of you. We're going to get you done today. We're going to put you in a loaner car if we need to. We're going to make sure your car is clean. When we get finished with it, we're going to do all these things to earn your business. Because you can go to Captain D's or you can go to Captain Anderson's. You go to Captain D's and get a fish dinner for $4.99. You go to Captain Anderson's and it ain't a $4.99 dinner. What's the difference? One is service. Think about it. You get great service, you get great ambiance, you get great people that take care of you and treat you like family. Captain D's, not saying anything bad about Captain D's. They're doing their job, but it's not the same. It's the same thing.
Fast food versus dining.
Well, it's the same thing.
It's the same thing with auto repair.
We have some people, we're not the big chain stores. We take care of our customers. We loan you cars. We're here to take care of our customers. Hey, this is James Morris. I got to go to a break. We'll be right back. If you got a car question, call us 850-763-0555 right there on the front of the screen, and we'll be more than happy to answer your question. We'll be right back.
If you want the best deal in town for tires, you need to call Baytown Tires at 873-8900.
Hanson and the guys at Baytown Tires take pride in serving Panama City for over 20 years. Baytown Tires on Highway 98 in St. Andrews. All service work backed by a nationwide warranty.
So, the I'll get there quick plumbing guy got there quick. To be fair, he did fix the leak in the kitchen drain. Too bad this is the bathroom. Mr. Reuter Plumbing ensures we fix what you see, and even what you don't.
All right, we're going to continue talking about, you've got a car. Here's another thing we see a lot of people's problems with. They come in and they say, there's something wrong with my car. Intermittently, it just shuts off, or intermittently, it just does this, or it just does that. And I go, well, I'd like to take a look at it and see what's doing, because they always come in asking, can you fix the car, and they want a price on something. I kind of look at them and go, price on what? Price on figuring out what's wrong with it. Well, yeah, I can give you a price on figuring out what's wrong with it, anywhere from half an hour up to 20 hours. I don't know. Why don't you come by and let me put a scanner on it and let me look and see what I see? It takes 15 minutes of your time, and I can give you point you in the right direction. And, normally if they're, reasonable thinking people, they get, that sounds like a great deal. Won't cost me anything, 15 minutes of my time. He's going to see if he can give me an idea what's going on. A lot of times we see cars that come in here and we'll plug a scanner in, and we'll see codes that just don't make any sense to some people. We'll see communication codes, and we'll see things that just, low voltage or high voltage, and when you scratch your head and go, when we see these things, that normally tells us we got a problem in our power supply, which could be the battery or the alternator or a combination of both. And I said, so what I'm seeing right now, you've got a lot of communication codes. That doesn't mean those parts are bad. That means something happened, whether it's a bad ground or whether it's a bad, these things can be, can be stopped a lot of times or corrected by just doing simple preventive maintenance, making sure your alternator is working properly. If you've got an open diode, and we see this all the time, and the only way you're going to find out if you got an open diode that I know of, if you don't have the right equipment, you may see your battery light slightly at night have a slight dim light. You can just see the battery light very dimly. If you see that, that's normally a sign you got a bad diode. And that means your battery's not charging like it's supposed to. And that can cause a lot of drivability problems because, remember, a car works off DC voltage, direct current, not alternating current. And if you got a diode that's bad, because that's what alternators do, they take alternating current and they split it. That's right, they split it where you get DC voltage through a rectifier on both sides of the rectifier, and it sends it to the battery. But if you've got a diode that's open, that AC voltage gets to the car's computer and can do really weird things. And I do mean weird things. It can make them shut off. It can make them stop running. It can make them misfire. It can make them do things like check engine lights for false codes. I've seen cars come in that just, the customer says, most of the time it runs good. But every so often I just go down the road and it bang, it shakes real violently and then it shuts off. I'll pull over the side of the road. I'll crank the car back up and I'll go down the road again. And I won't have another problem for another week or two. And I go, well, let's see what's wrong with the car. Well, in those times we find out the first thing we do, we start with the battery. Well, I shouldn't say that, the first thing. The first thing we do, we see if there's any codes inside there and write this information down. And the reason we do it that way is because once you start fooling with the battery, if you disconnect the battery for any length of time on today's cars, you may lose any codes that you've had in there. And I don't want to lose that. So I want to write those codes down. I don't write them down, I just go print report, hit a button on my scanner, and it goes to wirelessly goes to my computer or my printer over there, and it prints out a full report on all the codes, what they mean, on all the different computers on a car. Because some cars have, golly, 30, 40, 50 processors in a car. It's not uncommon in today's cars. And so we do a health check. That's the first thing I do. Then, once I get a health check, see what's going on with it, or got all that written down, and I know what the numbers are. I go look at if there's any, what we call freeze frames. And that tells us what were the conditions when this code set. And how fast were you going, how hot the car was, all these. And so I have all that information. So when I erase the codes, I go for a ride with the customer. I see which ones come back. And that way it kind of narrows it down, because a lot of times when we get cars in our shop, you, the customer, or have taken it to a couple of dozen shops, or I shouldn't say a couple dozen, but to someone else, and they've disconnected some things maybe, or they've induced a code, not meaning to, just checking something out, and maybe they, back probe something they shouldn't have probed, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It happens. And that's why I say we look at it, we get all this information, then we erase everything. We clear the memory on it, and then we go for a ride. And then I try to verify what the car is doing on the ride, and then we see what codes come back. We did that yesterday. I had a car that came in, truck, 2007 Chevy truck. Comes in barely running. And I said, well, this is unusual. This car just barely runs. I said, it's not normally these cars do that. Plugged my scanner in immediately, and I had codes for injector circuit drivers, or, injector. I had like 4 cylinders that didn't have injector drivers. It was one, these don't work. I'm going, wow, map sensor not working. What? Map sensor not working? Open the hood, and it looked like a squirrel or a rat had got inside there and chewed all the wiring up. That's exactly what had happened. Chewed up the wiring to the injectors and to the map sensor and to the evap, So I tell the insurance company, yep, here's what we got, and this is what we need to do. We need to change the wiring harness. So we changed the wiring harness. And I said, I can't tell you anything more than that about the car till I get the wiring harness fixed. I can't tell you anything. So we put the wiring harness on there. It takes about 2 weeks to get a special wiring harness made for this vehicle from the manufacturer. And we put it on the car, we turn the key on, erase the codes, all the codes are gone. Yay, fixed, wonderful. Fire the car up, runs great. Unfortunately, when it gets warm, the oil pressure drops down too low. And when that happens, we get a check engine light coming on that says, hey, you got a problem with your cam performance because it uses oil pressure and you've got too low of oil pressure. And we showed the customer this, and he has an option either to fix it or not to fix it. But I'm just saying, this is how you go about doing something. You have to systematically find the problem, address that problem, and then, like I told the customer, we will not know anything more about your car till we get the wiring harness repaired. That's what we told the insurance company as well too. Now we get to tell them they need to put an oil sending unit in that little filter, I believe is all that's wrong with it. And I don't think the customer wants to do it right now, but that's what I think is wrong with it. If you ever get a General Motors product in, and it's one of the newer platform type engines, say from like 2000 up. I think so. Like a 5.3 or a 4.8 or 6.0. Yeah, 4.8, 5.3, 6.0. Those engines right there, underneath the oil sending unit is a little filter. Honest to goodness, folks, there's a little filter underneath there. No one seems to know about it. But they clog up because people believe the 7,500 mile myth that you can go between oil changes. And so that filter, after about 4,000 to 5,000 miles, goes into bypass, so it lets dirty oil circulate through the engine. So all you people out there that are following your owner's manual that says you're a normal driver and you're going 7,500 miles between oil changes, keep doing it because mechanics love it, because that's what puts our children through college. Is people who believe that owner's manual, that think they're normal drivers. First off, you're not a normal driver. You're a severe service driver because you make short trips. If you make one short trip, honest to goodness, one short trip and the rest of your driving is, quote, normal, where you drive from here to Tallahassee nonstop and come back nonstop, that's normal driving, operating temperature. But if you make one trip to the store, a little short drive, or what technically, according to automotive engineers, people are a lot smarter than me, that you're now a severe service driver. And just about everybody listening to this show makes short trips to work, to home, to school. You know, just to be able to go to work, the average person in Bay County only drives about 15 minutes. Now, if you live north of Bay County and you're coming into Bay County, you may drive 30 minutes, maybe more. But you also get stuck in traffic trying to come in on Highway 231. So that's severe service, extended idling, stuck in traffic. That can be hard on a car. So by going too long between oil changes, that dirty oil circulates and it clogs that screen up. Well, when it clogs that screen up, it starves the oil sending unit from pressure. If the computer can't see what the oil pressure is, it ain't going to advance the timing. It's not going to allow it to work. That's how it works. I don't make the rules. I just know how these things happen. So if you get a car that comes in and it's showing low oil pressure and you got codes for things over here, make absolutely sure, here's the basics, there's nothing as simple as changing the oil and replacing that screen and putting a new oil sending unit in. That might be all that needs to be done. We're talking about something that probably costs less than $200-300 to do parts and labor versus having to change an engine or having to do a lot of pulling pans off and oil pumps and things like that. So there's a lot. I think the most is my YouTube video about 5.3 low oil pressure almost gone viral, Anna Marie? I think it has. Every day we get someone that calls or comments about my article about low oil pressure on a 5.3 engine, how to determine, is it the oil pump, is it the O-ring, or is it a faulty engine? It's really not hard, just by using a little extra oil and sometimes elevating the rear of the car so you cover up that O-ring that gets old and hard and sucks air. That's one test. But if you've got one that you've got oil pressure when it cranks up, you're not having a tick 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 sound on it, but you see your oil gauge going low on you, please, if you got any of these new platform engines, there's a screen underneath the oil sending unit that a lot of people don't know about. I think the dealership knows about it because we buy them all the time from them because we go over there all the time. When we first called them a couple years ago about it, they go, "There's a screen underneath there?" "Yep, there's a screen underneath there. Let's check that out." Well, sure enough, there is. They said, "We never changed that." And I said, "I don't know what to tell you, but we find a lot of trash in them, and we end up changing them." Now, that wasn't 2 years ago. That was about 5 years ago. Just seems like it was a couple years ago. But the thing is common sense isn't common when it comes to cars. But you've got to start with the basics. Do not start with the most dastardly thing. We had an antique come in our shop yesterday, a 1987, 2.9 liter Ford Ranger. Customers complain. Sometimes it starts, sometimes it don't. It always turns over, just don't want to start. First thing we did, brought the car in here, verified when we pushed it into the shop because it'd turn over, wouldn't start. No spark. I told my guy, I said, "We got no spark." I said, "Go to Identifix and look up the procedure for this antique of how to find out if you got spark or not." Well, the first thing it told us to do was get a lab scope out. Now, this is an antique from '87. Most people back in '87 didn't even understand how a lab scope worked, much less had one. But that was a test even back in '87. I had lab scopes back in '87. I did, because that was the only way I could fix cars, is having a lab scope. First thing we did, we grabbed the lab scope, went to the procedure, back probed on one of the wires to see if our profile ignition pickup, the thing inside the distributor, was actually working. I looked at it, I said, "It's working, but it's not that, the timing's right, but the amplitude or the amount of voltage is wrong." I'm scratching my head going, "Why is it? It's supposed to be 10 volts or higher, 10 to 12 volts. I only got about 3 volts. So we checked it out and found out that, well, we got a voltage drop. But the voltage drop wasn't on the positive side. The voltage drop was on the negative side. That's what was so neat about it. When we sit there and looked at it, I said, "Wait a minute, I got a signal here. Do I have 12 volts, yes or no, when the car's cranking?" "Well, yeah, I do. I got 12 volts. "Well, how come I don't have a 12 volt signal then?" And the answer was, maybe we don't have a good ground. So that's the third step of the test was verify you have a good ground. So what did we do? We unplugged the wires, put one end in where the 12 volt was, put the other end where the ground was with this test light, with my headlight, and the headlight didn't work. My headlight just sat there and looked at me like, my guy said, "It doesn't burn." I said, "Well, you got it on the ground and you got it on the positive. Have you verified you got 12 volts?" "Yes, I do." "Have you verified you got a ground?" "Well, according to my power probe, it says there's a ground in it." I said, "But it won't carry the current." I said, "So let's try a little experiment. Let's try a little experiment just for grins and giggles. Plug it back in, run you a jumper wire to that ground side, to the battery, just a temporary jumper wire, and see what happens." We did. Turn the truck fired right up and ran the entire time for hours. And that's as simple as it was with a faulty ground. So don't get carried away looking for those big things. Sometimes it can be something very simple. This is James Morris. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning. Give us a call.
Part of what I'd like to let you know is what we do and how we work our system. Basically, we've got about 700 stocking dealers scattered around the 15 counties here in the Big Bend area of the state. I run a fleet of trucks, vans, and what we call hotshot vehicles to deliver to our dealers quickly so they can help service you as fast and efficiently as they can. Provide timely and efficient service, and we're there to take care of our dealers, who in turn can take care of their customers.